They say the convent was swallowed by the fog, and the fog never left. Even after the sun came up, even after the search teams gave up, the fog lingered thick, cold, and full of whispers. No birds fly near its ruins now. The trees twist in silence, and the wind forgets to blow. But sometimes, when you walk too close, you hear them. Bells, not ringing, but breathing. And if you answer, she remembers your name. A woman once went in to take photos. Urban explorer, brave, arrogant. She laughed at the warnings carved into the iron gates, ignored the wax strips still warm on the stone. She made it 6 minutes inside. The camera kept rolling for 7. The last frame showed her face eyes wide, lips whispering something, backwards. They never found her body. Just the habit she wasn't wearing when she walked in. Welcome to Convent Nightmares. A channel where the veil between faith and fear is torn away, and the holy becomes horrifying. If you're here, you're not looking for stories. You're looking for secrets buried under centuries of silence. They arrived under orders, not faith. Contractors, hired by the local diocese to tear down what was left of the convent ruins. The documents said nothing about rituals, nothing about bodies, nothing about 13 names crossed out in blood. Just stone, overgrowth, asbestos things you could measure and clean. But the workers never made it to the second day. Not all of them. The first crew camped outside the walls, too cautious to enter after dusk. One by one, they fell asleep except for Giulio, who wandered off to relieve himself near the old bell tower. He never came back. They found his boots. At dawn, neatly placed beside a basin of water in the center of the chapel. The water was still. It shouldn't have been. Inside the convent, time did not pass the same. The shadows were wrong stretched in the wrong direction, even when there was no light. Tools left on the floor disappeared. Fresh footprints appeared overnight in soot that no one remembered stirring. They were small, bare, and all facing the same direction toward the crypt. No one remembered mentioning the crypt. It wasn't in the blueprints. It wasn't in the records. But everyone knew where it was, as if it had always been part of the place, even before it was built. Beneath the altar, beneath the stone, beneath the silence, one worker, Andres, insisted on saying a prayer before starting demolition. He was not religious. No one else joined him. He knelt beside the shattered cross on the chapel floor, whispered a name his grandmother used to say, to ward off fear. When he stood up, his mouth was bleeding, not from injury, just open, too wide, and smiling. The others wanted to leave, but the gates were gone. Not locked, gone, as if they'd never existed. The road back had been swallowed by vines. The air pressed against their lungs like a thick hand. No signal, no birds, no way to measure time. They tried to burn the chapel. Gasoline soaked the pews, the altar, the stairs. The match struck. The flame danced and died. A whisper came from beneath the floor. One word. Again. They ran, or thought they did. But every path led them back to the chapel steps. Over and over, until they stopped running. Until they started listening. Until they started remembering. Names they'd never heard before. Songs they'd never learned. Faces they'd never seen etched into their dreams like scars. 3 of them disappeared the second night. No sound, no screams. Just their sleeping bags folded at the foot of the statue of the Virgin. Antonio walked deeper into the crypt, the air thickening with every step, like moving through breath that didn't belong to him. The stone walls pulsed faintly, as if the structure itself was alive and waiting. Faint candlelight flickered ahead, though no one had lit them in years. Shadows moved independently of the flames. One crawled across the ceiling. Another clung to his back. The stairs opened into a chamber carved in a perfect circle, its walls lined with wooden pews rotted smooth by centuries of tears. In the center stood an altar of blackened stone, upon which rested a closed book chained to its pedestal. The air hummed, not with sound, but memory. Antonio stepped forward, drawn by something heavier than gravity. He placed his hand on the book, and he remembered her Dot, not from this life, not from any life, but she was there, behind his eyes, her veil soaked in blood, her hands folded in prayer, her smile carved into his thoughts. Catalina. The name came to him not as language, but as instinct. The moment he whispered it, the book opened. Its pages fluttered without wind, revealing symbols that moved even when he looked away. He tried to step back, but the ground had grown fingers. They held his ankles gently firm, but reverent. The book began to bleed. The chains rattled. From the shadows rose 13 figures, veiled and voiceless, each holding a candle with a flame that hissed his name. Antonio knelt. Not from fear. From understanding Dot above, the chapel bell rang once. His body remained in the crypt. But the thing that left him walked out. It looked like him. It wore his skin. But when it spoke, it said prayers no one should know. The workers packed up what they could, abandoning the site. They didn't speak of Antonio again. But in their dreams, his voice returned, always whispering. Always in THIRTEENs. The diocese buried the report, paid the families, moved the projects elsewhere. But the land remained, quiet, waiting, and every year on the night he vanished, the bells ring 13 times, even when the chapel is empty. The nuns came next. Not the old ones, those had long since disappeared, consumed by vows never meant for light. These were new, young, sent by the church to reclaim what they had once surrendered. They wore white veils and smiles too perfect, and they prayed too loud for anyone who had ever listened to silence. Sister Marianne led them, bright-eyed, determined, chosen. She believed in restoration. She believed in cleansing. But she also believed that no place was ever beyond redemption. Not even this one. Not even the walls that bled in the moonlight. Not even the floor that pulsed when no one touched it. The first night, they sang hymns, loud enough to drown the wind, loud enough to echo off the stone. But the echoes didn't match the words. They came back wrong, twisted, slower. One nun fainted. Another bit through her lip mid-prayer. They all said it was nerves. It WASN single quotes T. Marianne found a journal under her mattress. Old, bound in leather so worn the cover flaked like dry skin. Inside, names, 13, each followed by a symbol she didn't recognize. One name was hers, already written, already crossed out. She didn't sleep that night. On the second day, Sister Joan was missing, her room untouched, her shoes outside, her door. A trail of salt led to the chapel, but none of them remembered putting it there. Marianne followed it, alone. Inside, she found the candles lit, though no one had entered. The cross was upside down, nailed that way with teeth. She turned to leave and saw herself praying at the altar. But the version of her didn't move like a person. It flickered, it glitched, and when it smiled, her own mouth bled. She ran. The hallway stretched longer than before. Doors multiplied. Some opened to walls. Some opened to eyes. Some opened to graves with names that hadn't been written yet. She reached her room hours later, or maybe days. There was no more sunlight. Only the sound of wet breath behind the walls. They tried to call for help. The radios screamed. The phones bled static. The chapel bells rang 13 times. Again, Catalina had returned. Marianne didn't speak for 3 days. Not because she couldn't, but because every time she opened her mouth, someone else's voice came out. Sometimes it was Sister Joan. Sometimes it was a girl no one had ever seen. Sometimes it was prayer, in reverse. The other sisters tried to comfort her. They lit candles. They sang hymns. But each flame bent away from her. Each note dissolved before reaching her ears. Then she began to write, not in English, not in Latin, but in a script no one could read. She filled the walls of her room, her sheets, her skin, over and over, until the ink became blood, and the blood became wax, and the wax began to hum. At night she paced. At dawn she wept. At noon she smiled. One by one the others began to change. Sister Helena found her rosary melting in her hands. Sister Agnes vomited moths. Sister Ruth walked into the baptismal pool and never surfaced, though the water remained still. The chapel walls whispered the Lord's Prayer, but added a 13th verse. And outside, the sun rose only halfway before retreating into dusk. The convent wasn't haunted. It was Hungry Dot, and Mary Ann, now veiled in crimson, opened the crypt again. The chains had rusted into the floor, fused with bone. The book lay open, still bleeding. The pews were occupied, each by a faceless figure wearing a habit soaked in ash. Mary Ann didn't tremble. She didn't pray. She recited the name Catalina 13 times and took her place at the altar dot above. The bells rang once for each named forgotten dot, and below, the 13th heart began to beat. Above, the bells rang once for each name forgotten. They say if you visit now, nothing remains. No walls, no stone. Just an impression in the ground, like a wound that never fully healed. But at night, if the wind is still, you'll hear it out. Soft hum, a name whispered beneath the earth, followed by 13 slow tolls. And if you kneel where the altar once stood, you might feel a breath against your ear. Cold, familiar, but it won't ask for prayer, that it will ask for your name. Thank you for watching Convent Nightmares. If you made it to the end, leave a like too. Let us know you're still with us. Subscribe if you dare to return. And tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from, so she can find you faster. Until next time, keep your candles lit. Some vows are never broken. They just wait to be fulfilled.